Okay, cool.
But yeah, awesome. People are starting to come in, which is really, really exciting. We've got coming up for over 10 people. So welcome everyone. Just want to just give a few more minutes for everyone else to join. We are live and we're joined by Emma Wailes, who is recently joined me on the podcast. And we had a really good session. We'll release the podcast soon. We're just talking about storytelling. And so asked Emma to join us. So we get to have a chat with her. Just in case this is your first time on, just as we're kind of warming up and people are joining, there is a live chat option. So if you do have questions, make sure to say hi. Thank you, Alva. Good to see you. And yeah, like we're going to really want to make this a really collaborative session. So another thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be sharing then a Miro link. And so just make sure that the Miro link that you have is you're able to get in and access okay. So I'm going to set it here to invite team and board, which means that you can access this. And if you've not used Miro before, don't worry. It's just a collaborative tool. All right. So I think that's us for now. I know a lot of people were maybe not able to join, and so we'll go and make a start. So thank you again for joining. Some of you are brand new to UX Energy, so we'll give a bit of an introduction to that. And some of you also brand new to the concept of storytelling, and also maybe brand new to Emma, maybe not come across her. So do make sure to connect with her on LinkedIn. All right, let's go make a start. So just to talk about then UX Energy, this is my project that I've been starting since August, which is a mentoring program that helps you start and excel in your career. And so this is one of the parts of the sessions that we're helping people grow in terms of mentoring sessions, but also workshops. We want to try and help you with your career, to help you get hired, get your portfolio in front of other people. And I'm trying to build this to be a community, not just for learning, but also where you can network with other mentors. And so I'm trying to get Emma to be more involved and hoping to get other people in as well. So there's really exciting. And just at the end of this as well, I've just got like a discount code for joining that I'll share afterwards. But Emma, let's hand over to you. I'm going to click your profile. This is now you're fully in control. So if everyone can see my screen, everyone's comfortable with the chat. Hi, mine. I'm just going to be the facilitator here. So if people have questions, please put them in the chat. And Emma, over to you. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, like Jonah said, my name's Emma Wailes. I'm a principal UX designer at Hippo Digital. So we're a consultancy where we work with a lot of public sector projects and departments within government and NHS, as well as private companies as well. So we do quite a broad mix of the UCD process. So, you know, throughout my day-to-day work, I do a lot of work telling stories, and that can be anything from, you know, updating the team in the morning as to where we're at. You know, you tell a bit of a story there, or you gather the frustrations from the users throughout workshops, and then, you know, you'll have to tell stories to get the buy-in of stakeholders when we're making changes and suggesting recommendations to, you know, what essentially is changing their ways of working. I also, in my spare time, illustrate for children's picture books. So that allows me to use some of the techniques from the storytelling in illustration to also play back to stakeholders and understand how to get that message across in different ways. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at a few different tips and techniques of what we can do with storytelling. So I'm going to be doing a few next slides with Jonas. So next slide, please.
Yeah, I'm following you here, so I'm hoping.
All right. Oh, yeah. Let's see if it works. Yes, perfect. So the objectives today that we're going to be covering is why we tell stories, how to construct a really good story, what, how to build those stories into your everyday work and the practice, and also how do we make sure that we're winning over those different stakeholders. So how do we share those stories with them? So what I've done, I've just put a few different icons down on the Miro board. So if there's anything that we're wanting you to join and participate in, then there's a little face symbol, and then additional areas that you can go away and have a think about. Usually the clouds. So why do we tell stories? Because storytelling is a massive part of being human. We use them to persuade and inform in a way that nothing else really does. It's something that we've done forever. It goes back centuries. It goes back to a long time ago, and it allows us to share the information in a way that we build up that connection through emotion, through empathy, and building it out that way. It also helps us understand the information and makes it memorable. So what we generally see is that it takes a lot more brain power to listen and remember stories than it does to remembering a list of facts. And that's, again, because it makes that connection in our brain to get that deeper understanding of what it is. You also develop a trust with the storyteller when you're listening to a story. So when we're thinking about telling stories to stakeholders, building that connection with them, not only through what information you're giving them about the work or about what research you found, but also between yourselves, and that brings them on board a lot more in that way. So like I said, telling stories goes back a long time, back to cave times, even possibly further. It's the only cave times are the only recorded evidence that we've told stories. And as you can see there in the illustration, it comes through pictures. It wasn't through words initially. We've built a way of communicating with each other through visual role play and pictures, a lot longer than with the written language. Enabled us to build up. It kept life.
Hey Emma, I don't know.
It
I think
allowed us
we're
to
hearing some
work out
audio
possible
delay.
scenarios as well, to understand what might happen in the future. So if we've experienced a bit of a frightening experience when we've gone off hunting, and then we replay that story, it enables us to other people to not have that same experience, or look out for those predictions that it might actually happen again. So what I want you to do, and I think Joni, you said that they've got access to the Miro board. It'd be good to just put a few post-it notes down on the next board, and reflect about when you've heard a story. And I've just added a couple of examples at a high level, but think about what was the story, who told it, and what made that story memorable. So if we just have a few minutes to just have a think about that, and it'd be worthwhile just jotting some things down.
Great. So folks, hopefully everyone's been able to click the Miro link that I shared in the chat. If you go and create your account and get set up, feel free to either click my face or Emma's face in the Miro, and what that will do is it will take you to this page. You'll grab a sticky note, and it's all fully interactive. And yeah, just type in what you want. I just put one in here around my uncle telling me jokes, and it just stayed with me for life. Just the way he described it.
Yeah.
I'm actually seeing quite a few other ones about family.
Yeah, and I think that's, one of our earliest experiences, isn't it? You'll get parents, you'll get friends, you'll get siblings telling stories. If you think about, even when you ask someone what their day's been like, they're telling you a story of what it was like, how it made them feel, and they're imparting some of that information to you, and they're telling you their story because they trust you. And so there's that real connection, going into it, to really think about, why we tell stories, and what the benefit of them are. But yeah, so that's quite nice. Like some of the stories about, what makes you do something, and having that change in circumstances. Yeah.
Just as a side note, Emma, I'm noticing some like audio delay. I don't know whether it's the working from home Wi-Fi or something, but
Yeah. So a lot of them talk around how, the process, how people told the story as well. I think that's a really interesting one, because we pick up a lot from. Oh,
yeah, Emma, is it just me, folks, that can hear a bit of a
see.
delay with Emma's audio? It's
Anything
all
up
good.
now?
Yeah, unfortunately, Emma, there's like probably about a 6 to 10 second delay.
Oh wow.
So what you're saying is good. It just happens a bit slowly.
Oh, you can see my mouth at a different time or something.
Yeah, yeah. But it's okay. I think it's
Okay.
clear. It's just maybe a bit delayed.
Okay.
Maybe it could be a bandwidth thing. So like we could turn off cameras, for example.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that.
I'll turn mine off too.
See.
You've seen our faces, guys. It's all good. But there's some great stuff being put down here, Emma. Some of these comments.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see how, we've got who's telling the story, how they're telling it, what they're telling it about, and how you remember it. So I think that's a really good, um, starting point in understanding what we might do, um, in terms of, you know what a good story looks like. So if we just all come back, you can feel free to keep writing, different stories down. Be really good to see how that then plays back, towards the end. So, what does make a good story? Now, I think we've highlighted some of the areas there, in terms of what makes a good story and what's made it memorable to yourself. So, it's a really good point to take forward when thinking about how you're telling the stories to others and how you're telling them to stakeholders, because it will really emphasize, that message that you're trying to get across. If it's memorable, if it's humorous, they're going to go away, and really, remember the key points. So the same principles, apply to storytelling to stakeholders as they do to, films, as it does to animation, and as it does to picture books as well. So this is why I always go back, and if anyone's asking for some advice around, how to tell a great story, to the stakeholders or to your team, let's go back and say, well, just think about the picture books that you used to read as a child. What made them special? What really drove that message across? And there's key points around that in terms of what they do to capture the interest. And that's knowing your audience, knowing how to apply to it. So you're not going to write really advanced words, advanced sentences for a child who's 3 or 4 year old, because they just won't be able to read that. So they won't be able to connect with the story if they're not being able to understand it. Thinking about the journey that a hero goes on and understanding what their part in the story is. And again, going back to that emotional connection, seeing how the interaction between images and text can really create a flow to the story. So like I said, one of the first things that we need to be thinking about in terms of that storytelling, whether this is a show and tell, whether you're just trying to get some insights across, or whether it's engaging with them in the first few meetings to really get them to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that's essentially in our part of the project, because when we go into public sector departments, quite a lot of people will be very sometimes resistant to change. Other times they will be quite wary of it. Other times they'll be fully on board, but you need to be able to tell that story as to what the benefits are to them for really start to engage with them. So thinking about the journey, it might just be in picture books, we tell the story of how the hero goes through from the start to the finish. We'll have in UX, we'll have user journeys and maps that try and tell the story of what that process looks like. So it doesn't matter whether it's a physical or a transitional journey. And in the transitional journey, in picture books and films, we might be thinking of that journey of growth that someone goes on. It might be that process. So there's additional ways in which a journey can be understood from people. And it's our job as the storyteller to be able to take people on that journey and take them through it, understanding that there might be challenges at times, but there will always be, a resolution, a finishing point that you can get to. So I quite like this illustration here, because this is from a picture book called Journey by Aaron Becker. And what is interesting about this is it's a wordless picture book. So when we think of a book, we always think that, there's got to be words. But journeys don't have to be how we assume they should be. And so he manages to tell a narrative, and he tells a really good story just through the use of the images and how they go across. So, is it following? Yeah. So, quite often, and this is an example of a user journey that I put together for a previous role that I did when I was at Foot Asylum. So what you can see is journeys will, always interact, and whether this is picture books or within UX, you'll interact with multiple users, multiple characters, and they will all have their story to tell. So it's not just when we look at UX, we need to think about all of the people who will interact with that product at different levels and different points. And so in this journey, you can see that we've got 3 stories to tell. We've got the first one, which is Actor 1. That's the story of the customer. And that will be the one that we have a strongest connection to as individuals. But from a stakeholder's point of view, that's their main focus, because that's where, the value to the business is coming in. In Actor 2, you've got the shop floor staff. And the third one is the storeroom colleague. So we've got 3 different viewpoints, all coming into the same story, but also having different roles within it. They all have valid experiences feeding into the same process, but it's up to us to determine whose story we tell and how we go about it. And with all good stories, we need a flow to go with it, a rhythm to get it going. If we have a story that is very monotonous, that doesn't have any ups and downs within it, then it becomes very boring. And that if that experience is steady in a UX flow, then people switch off and people disengage with that service or product. If there's no challenge in the flow and there's no real, upbeat to it, or dips in the flow, then it can become stressful for the user. And in the user journey, that might be where they're hitting frustrations in the product. Things aren't going right. I know me and Jonah have had a few technical issues, and there was that delay on this just a few minutes ago. That's a little dip in the experience. It doesn't not create a valid experience. It's just that change of circumstance. So what we can do is to look at dramatic arcs, and I've put a nice little link down in terms of what dramatic arcs are down at the bottom here. That'll open up into a different link. But when we use dramatic arcs, we can see that experience flows better. People find value in a story when people hit a bump in the road. They'll find issues within what they're trying to do, but that makes us realize that all heroes have their challenges, whether that's within themselves or whether they're trying to get to the end result. But it gives us that connection to the hero or to our users in our process. So a bit of these, so you can see, everyone starts from that comfort zone. It's not a bad place, but there might be something missing. And this is usually where we come in on a public sector project to go, okay, so we're going to transform this. It might be working perfectly fine, but things need to change. Things need to move on. As we go into you might end up finding them in a crisis with things not working, disaster recoveries have had to go in place. And something really needs to change at this point. Then we'll go into a recovery mode. This is where you're starting to make the changes in the user journey, and people will see that improvement or the advancement within it, and then feel like they're on a better level. Now, it might not necessarily be something new. It might not be something completely different. It might just be an improvement in a small part of that user journey. But it's worthwhile to consider how we make sure that we're keeping that rhythm going. So if we think back to the cave paintings, like I said before, we naturally have more connection to images than words, because that goes back a lot further in time for that. And it's not only that, but it's the fact that when we're looking at an image, we can absorb a lot more information and complicated amounts of information rather than just reading the text. We're not limiting the understanding of what's happening, but it also gives us that indication. So within this image, I've just pulled out some of the meanings that we can take from this one image. So we've got, the fact that there's positioning within the image signifies quite a few different things. You've got the idea that, opening a door sparks curiosity. They were wanting to see, this part of the adventure. But overall, if we go into the science of it, over 50% of our brain is dedicated to visual processing. So when we're trying to grab people's interest and we're trying to make that connection, they will always make a better connection through visual stories. And that's probably why, if we're, working in an office or whether we're, working remotely, we generally prefer that face-to-face connection. I know we've had to drop ours off for technology reasons, but it usually works to build up that understanding. And again, going back to that trust element. So we're going to drop back into your time now. But just a couple of minutes on this. Think about what the words say, what does the drawing show, and then what can we mean by connecting what the words say and what the picture's saying. What we're bringing through from that in terms of emotion, in terms of what might have happened before, what might be about to happen. So just grab some post-it notes and feel free to throw some things on the board. Yeah. Some sad faces. Yeah. And you can tell that, can't you, by the position of, their eyes, even though there's no mouth, so there's no kind of visual indication that, would be an upside down mouth, but you can kind of get a sense from his body language that there might be sad. And yeah, potentially saying goodbye could be the fact that, that's the thing that makes us sad sometimes. So I think what is important to take away from this is when we start to read images and start to read situations, we're imparting what we've experienced before. We've imparted some of our own understanding of what makes us feel that way back into that visual, whether that's a scenario, whether that's just a single image. We can get a lot from it in this. Okay. So yeah, so we've got some uncomfortable body language, cold atmosphere. Yeah, so we're looking at the colours, we're looking at the what they're wearing. It's a penguin, maybe. There's some really nice touches there, and I think you can have a sense there on how we draw out meanings from things just by seeing something. And that's what your stakeholders are doing when they're in the show and tell. Even if you just think that you put a nice picture on whilst you're talking around what you're doing, they're making connections between what you're saying and what you're showing. And this is why we call it a show and tell, because you really need to be showing something that can impart that additional information. Okay, cool. So we'll just move on to the next slide. But that's some really good takeaways there. So like I said, when we're building up that information around the image, we're connecting emotionally to it. We're putting something that we've experienced back into it, and understanding that, that level of empathy is there with the character. It's a cartoon character, a character with no mouth, and it's a penguin. We don't naturally have relationships with those characters, but at this moment in time, we're connecting with them emotionally. We're trusting them as part of that story. And 93% of our communication is nonverbal. So, images are very powerful because we're linking it back to our memories and emotions. And because of that, we get better understanding through visual experiences. So I always say to people when they're, putting work together, make sure you're showing something, rather than just trying to describe it. So it takes a lot more effort to describe it. And then, thinking back, how do you tell a good story? You leave them something to end with, keeping them thinking afterwards, understanding, what can happen, whether it's a cliffhanger, whether you're waiting for something new, or whether it's a conclusion to something. Really tie it up with, something for them to hold on to, rather than that loose end of just, leaving it halfway through. And I think, I don't know, I mean, we are running a bit over time. I don't know how much time we've got, so I can skip over this, if you think, Jonah.
We're doing okay, Emma.
Okay.
I'd allowed for up to an hour if you wanted to.
Okay. All
So
right. Okay.
as much time as you have, really. It is
Okay.
recorded, so if you do need to drop, folks, it's all good. We'll just try and
Yeah.
record it, and you can share it afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So this is another little exercise then, is to just trying to understand from your point of view why you wouldn't want to listen to someone's story. So we've got some post-it notes to the side again. Yeah. Just feel free, just grab some in, and we can just put some ideas on as to why you wouldn't want to listen to a story. What would make you switch off? Um,
Interesting one, Emma, isn't it? Because I think I heard this similar story with getting stakeholders to join in and get creative and draw. People
yeah,
think, oh, I'm not a child, and they
yeah,
almost put away their childish inner self to be like, oh, I'm an adult. I don't need to use my imagination.
yeah. And it's the same with stories as well. I think we don't realize how often we tell stories because we automatically assume that storytelling is about that childhood experience.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, the amount of stakeholders who will turn around to me if I hand them a pen and say, "Come on, then just like put something down on paper and show me what you're trying to mean," because it's an easy way to get across those communication barriers. I think
Yeah.
we've got language coming down here on the board, making people feel excluded. We can do that accidentally, as designers and digital teams, because a lot of our public service projects will have people who've never actually interacted with a digital team before. So
Right.
if we start saying, oh, we're going to do a show and tell, we're working in an agile way, they really won't understand it. So I think sometimes when telling the story allows them to feel connected, um, but also drawing takes some of that away as well.
I really like Iman's points. She's saying people are skeptical and have no time for imagination.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, I like that one as well. Some great sticky notes in here.
Yeah, and I think it's really useful if people are, taking these ideas away with them, and just really thinking about it next time you tell a story about how you can overcome some of these. So I think, there's other things that sometimes we think of not wanting to listen to a story because we've had stakeholders recently just say we've already been told this, we've already told you this, and it's so they feel that their time is being taken up with something that they don't really want to get involved with again. Wasting people's time and get confusing them, whether that's the language, whether it's the subject. You explaining things clear enough, and it'd be good to get everyone's feedback on whether I'm explaining it clear enough today as well. And just sometimes we accidentally go into telling other people's stories, and that sometimes doesn't work as well because the audience will have realized that it's someone else's story to tell, and you're breaking that trust in the storyteller's opportunity to tell their stories. So how do we get around things like that without breaking that trust in the connections?
Yeah, nice one. Emma, just for the sake of the Miro board, are you able to just zoom in slightly?
Yeah.
The reason being is like half the board is a bit zoomed out.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, that looks better. Does that then cover up your whole screen? That is perfect. I think it's just more for the recording sake, but yeah, nice one. Thank you.
Yeah. Trying to get it there.
Looking
So
tidy.
yeah. As I click onto the next one, it's probably going to zoom back out, but we can zoom back in each time I go on the next
You're
one.
good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, so yeah, people don't want to empathize with others. Yeah, maybe maybe there's a trigger in it, in the story that they don't want to go there, and you're touching you're hitting a nerve that just you need to understand a little bit more before they'll accept your story. Yeah, people thinking they're right. I've had quite a lot of stakeholders who've come in to listening to show and tells thinking that they're right and that what I'm presenting back is a, you know a fictional story at times. So, but yeah, and that kind of leads us quite nicely into the stakeholder story. Um, so there's some quotes that stakeholders have told me before now. So I've had where we said people might not want to believe it because they think they're right. Yeah, completely that. I know more than you. Why should I listen to this? I don't need this information. We just need it to be the same as what it was. um, so there's quite a few things to take on board when you're presenting to stakeholders. Sorry, um, giving them those stories because you really need to understand your audience, and this is why you need to understand your stakeholders because they're difficult and complex. They come from a different mindset to yourself. They will come from different background. Their priorities are different to yours, but it's important to find out what they need from it. And if you understand what they need from your presentation or your show and tell or the project, then it will help you tell the story in a way that gets the message across or gets the information across to them in that way. And so what's the real thing here? I think with stakeholders, there's often underlying elements to it. Um, you know, if we think about the stakeholder who came to me and said, We just need to be it to be the same. We don't want the change. They might be quite frustrated. They might be quietly dismissive of it. They might be ignoring it. So you're seeing the outputs of their emotions and behaviors when they're replying to you in this way. But there's a lot more going on underneath. They might be scared of the change. They might not feel so confident that they'll know what to do afterwards. They might feel like their job's at stake as well. So there's possibly a lot more going on than what is actually coming to the surface. So really thinking and trying to read, the situation, read how they're responding to you, and what you've said as well in terms of how that has come across. And I think this is a regular one. I don't know how many times you've had this, Jonah, but I am the user. I've had so many people think that they are the user.
All the time. All the time. And they are a user, but they're probably not the end user, right?
Yeah, and completely. And I've had again in my previous role where I've had stakeholders say, "Yeah, but I've done this job. I was that person." It's like you were that person, but at a different time with different priorities, with different circumstances. So you're not that user that I'm wanting to talk to. And again, that comes from a lot of internal kind of thoughts and emotions. So it's something that we just need to be thinking of when we're telling those stories. And this is the way in which I try to recognize their story and try and work out how to turn their story in and take them on the journey with me. So if you're getting stakeholders or people who are saying, I am the user, what we generally do at times is pull them into that research so they can witness it for themselves and have that aha moment of finding something out that they didn't actually think or they didn't do or know at the time that they thought they were the user. Looking at we need it to be just the same. What we try to do is give them the data, give them the evidence that things can change and it will be better. And that might be quite hard to start with. In the retail project that we worked on at Fox Island before I worked at Hippo, they had no data. So you might be looking at paper processes and trying to digitize them where there's no actual physical evidence that you can work from. So you need to go out and find it. You need to go, and be getting that information to start the journey. And if they don't really want it and it's not what you've produced isn't what they wanted, get them involved in the sessions. Make them part of it by getting them doing the drawing, getting them, picking up the pens, the post-it notes. We've got some workshops coming up in a few weeks' time, and the whole workshop is about people putting post-it notes down. We're not doing the work. They are, because then that will then mean that they're invested in that journey as well. And then, thinking about that show and tell. So if they are busy, if they are, not as invested, make sure you're recording your show and tells. Share it up front. So we, on the project at the moment, we've got people with accessibility needs. So what we generally do is we set up the presentation in advance so that we can send it out. So they've got time to put it through screen readers, to take time to absorb the information that we're going to be talking through first. And that also means that they don't feel stupid when they come to watch it. Like we said earlier on in one of the activities, the language can make people feel stupid. How do we avoid that? We just don't use jargon. We don't use words that they won't understand. Simple words. Everyone prefers simple words to anything else. And me and Jonah have spoken about this quite a lot, but low fidelity prototypes, and allowing people to explore and play around with them is a really good thing, because they don't, again, it's not making them feel stupid. If you're sharing a sketch with them, they feel like they can scribble on it. They feel like they can change it for you. Whereas if it's such a polished, final piece of work, they're going to be a little intimidated about making those changes, because they'll see the effort that's been put into it. And again, going back to that thing, creating the emotional connection, helping them see it from the user's point of view, helping them see it from the customer's point of view, or the shop floor person's point of view. And like I said, having that final say, that end point of the story, helps them know that, one, your show and tell is finished, that there's progress being made, and that they understand that they're part of that journey and they will be seeing the next steps. And even if you don't know what the next steps are, which is quite often the case when we're in a discovery, we tell them that we're honest, we're transparent in the way we work, so that, again, they know that we're not perfect as a digital team. We will be figuring things out as we go along, and that's fine. And that's where they come in, because they can help us figure it out. So how do we make storytelling part of our process? Well, like I said earlier, figuring out who our audience is means tailoring it into a way that might be a little bit different. So thinking about, if it's a stakeholder meeting, and we might have the people who are playing things back to, the CEOs, the CTOs, anyone who's in charge of the company, the directors, the different elements. Or we might have the people who we class as the naysayers, who is, yeah, I'm using jargon.
I had to Google it
there. So we've got the naysayers, people who might not be convinced within these meetings, and that's because they're having to balance things. They're not just got a free reign of allowing you to do anything. They are having to try and manage a lot of different things. So I put here, connect with their amygdala. That is the part of your brain that has the biggest emotional response. So it's that part of your brain that reacts to different things, and that's where your emotions come from. It's a natural instinct. So if you connect with that, and you connect with their emotions and their human level, and not their kind of thinking part of their brain, then you're going to be able to capture their imagination. You're going to be getting them one step past the fact that they've got to balance all these different tricky things. Think about blog readers. They're coming to you for information, but the challenge might be for them is that they're very time poor. They want the information. So how do you then tell them that story, but not waste their time? And the best way to do that is thinking about chunking it up. Really bringing down the amount of information that they can handle. And at times, we as humans, we will break things down. So if you speak aloud and say out how you play back your telephone number or something else, you will naturally see that you chunk things up, and you chunk the information up because it's easier to remember. And so with blog pieces, having something that, one, captures their imagination to start with, but also gives them the short amount of information in a practical way, allows them to retain it. And then in interviews, I always go into an interview thinking that, the audience in an interview are really like smart aliens. They're really clever, they'll be able to understand what you're saying, but might not understand the context of what you're saying it to. So, you know, they might not understand the context of a story. So you understand and make sure that you're giving them enough context and enough information, assuming that they don't know everything. Because if you assume that they know something, you're just going to skip over parts in your story and it won't make sense. And then you're going to frustrate them. I think it's, oh yeah. And then again, it's a big part of our work in UX is accessibility and inclusion, especially when you're working in the public sector. So really thinking about letting others be part of your journey, whether that is through an accessibility point of view, whether that's being involved with the process. Don't make them feel stupid, avoid the jargon, and using imperfect prototypes, like we said before. It all feeds back into what we said about the show and tell. But if you can do this throughout and really make inclusion a big part and the forefront of your work, then you're going to do really well in engaging and getting people on board. And it's those advocates at the beginning of the journey that you'd want to be pulling everyone else on along. And there's something about when you're trying to engage with stakeholders on a storytelling level that they're curious. They really want to see what you're doing. And it's quite easy to fall into the trap of us being very perfect and precious about what we're working on. And, it's only a sketch level, so I just don't really want to share it at this moment in time. But if we share things and we're open to sharing very early stages of work, then they're going to see the journey that we're going on as well. And they'll be more invested and more grateful and reciprocative of what we actually are doing when we come round to the show and tells. So I have a big thing about when I'm working with stakeholders is I'll create, a Miro board, a Lucid board, and I'll have just a few frames on it with, what my objectives are of that board. There might be nothing there to start with, but they know I'm thinking about it. They know that they can add to it and say, oh, actually, if not, we need to be thinking about this as well. And I allow them to, help me out with, working out what we need to be covering off. And that really helps create those feedback loops, because once someone wants to start helping you, they will continue helping you, and it's a natural behavior that if we've helped someone, they naturally in return will want to help back. So by doing it and by sharing your work early, you get that engagement, and that engagement is part of that trust that we spoke about in the beginning. And then next steps. Even if you're not sure what the next steps are, because no one is ever 100% certain. I don't think Tim Peake knew what the outcome of his space mission was before he started off. But he shared his journey. He shared moments when they were up in space and he'd, do a video call back down to Earth. But again, it's being on that journey with people, knowing that there's next steps coming along. We've just got a quick final task for you all. So going back to your original stories that you were putting down at the very beginning, thinking about the steps that we've gone through in this session, what could you do to make it a better story if you had to retell that story? So what emotions came out of it? What feelings, what visuals were there? And just take a moment to think about that and see what you can think.
I would say, Emma, just from unfortunately a lot of people are mute still, but
All right.
I was just going to say, like, from my side, I think, and feel free to raise your hand, folks, if you want, and I can make you a co-host, and we'll definitely do that for questions later. But I think for me,
Yeah.
when my uncle would tell the stories, it was the humor, it was the suspense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the phrase, "Oh, it's the way you tell it," right? And it, you know,
Yeah.
that would always be a phrase that my family would use. It'd be like, "Oh, it's just the way he tells the joke," you know. And I think the way he
Yeah.
told it was just he slowed it down, build up suspense. He did voices, in, you know, just as a
Yeah.
kid, that really captivated me, I guess.
Yeah, and you can see almost in that the dramatic arcs of how he's taken the rhythm and the flow of the story to really, capture that interest, and help you retain it. So yeah, it's a really good point. Okay, so in summary, then we tell stories to build those connections, and gain the empathy of our audience. We include stakeholders or our audience on the journey. Whether that's a picture book, whether it's a film, you will be captivated by that journey. And if you're not, then you'll be switching off. We connect more with images and we gain more information in a short space of time. And, when you think about having to play back work to stakeholders or get them as part of the story, then think about sharing your work and asking for feedback, rather than just waiting until the end. Because no one wants to wait for the end of a story to realize that it wasn't actually the story that they wanted to listen to. And that is it. So yeah, questions.
Yeah, folks, we do have a couple of minutes left. So just if you want to raise your hand, and if you want to speak, you can type in the chat if you prefer, if you're not wanting to. But yeah, please feel to raise your hand, folks, if you've got any questions. Any questions will do. If you want to ask more about Emma, her experience, if you want to ask her about her horror stories or where she's been able to do this well. I would also say that I'm in the process of editing one of the podcasts that we did, and so Emma tells some of her good stories there as well. But yeah, Alva, Cameron, David, Iman, Amelia, Zanura, any questions, do let me know. If not, what I would just say is I just love your feedback. There's a link here. You just click the button. That'll just take you to a simple Google form. But yeah, for the time being, I'll stop sharing my face. And I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for coming on. It's been a really good session. I know some people have been able to drop off, and that's quite okay. But yeah, thanks again, Emma, for coming and for sharing your stories. You know, that you put a lot of hard work into this, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, hopefully we can all feel better equipped to communicate and get buy-in and understand people's worlds better. So
yeah, hopefully. It's always a tricky one, but it's always an interesting one to play back. And I think, from a storytelling point of view, if you can capture their interest in that way, and using the picture books as your kind of reference as to how it all works and how it tells the story, it's really insightful.
Awesome. David, what are you cooking? Just out of interest, I can see that you're cooking while listening. Yeah, Thank you, and please feel free to fill in the survey, and I will send through an email just to kind of wrap up. I'll share a sneak peek preview of Emma's podcast, and also give you then a discount code if you do want to join further. Sorry, David, I was saying, what are you cooking? Just because you said that you're cooking while listening, which is great to multitask. You're welcome, Zadira. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I am not.
It's 6:30. I need to have some dinner. So oh, chorizo chicken pasta.
Wow.
Is it got the melted
Yes.
cheese on it? That would be
Oh,
the one.
I think we need to go around to David's house. My
Yeah,
goodness.
David, where do you live? We're gonna come around. But yeah, guys, we're just over the hour time, so I'll be mindful of everyone's time. We'll go eat, go get some food, and everyone, thank you so much for coming on. And if you are watching and recapping on this, thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoyed this session. And looking forward to getting your feedback. All right, that's me. I'm gonna
Brilliant.
end the stream, and we'll catch you later. All right, guys. Cheers.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.